Blake Fisher. My God, Blake Fisher. Here we go with Blake Fisher. My co-host Sean Pendergast was super amped up that the Texans drafted a Notre Dame offensive lineman. Like played wherever Joe Alt didn't play. We're gonna say that he played left tackle, he played right tackle, but Joe Alt is the big shimmering mountain of a man that everybody was in love with. So tall, lanky guy, 6'6" plus, but not overly big. I estimated at 310. I know his combine weight, it might be a little bit heavier than that, but he's a lanky guy who actually looks taller than he actually is because he's kind of lanky. So I think there's upside here with Blake Fisher. But just to get a sense, just a few plays, if you watch him at right tackle, this first one, watch his hands. He's like a kung fu master on this play. I really admire guys, offensive tackles, who can chop, stayed in perfect position the entire time. Like for a big guy, moves his feet really well. The tall, lanky guys, sometimes guys can get up underneath them and exploit them. We're going to see a little bit of that at the end of this. But for the most part, right, like there with his left hand was really strong. For some reason, when I was finding some of these clips, it was like on a play where he had a good snap, but his quarterback got sacked by somebody else's fault. Nice wide base. Even here, where he's got a tendency to get beat inside sometimes, but here he does a good job of riding the guy through the inside of the pocket as one of his teammates lets him down. Run game. This is where John Harris gets excited, I think, is A, athletic enough to pull and take on guys in space, but also B, he's got a little bit of the taste for this player. He'll finish people. Like he'll ride them to the ground. This one too, he wants to root people out and actually does show an ability to get up underneath shorter guys than him. And that's a big thing because I'm going to show you a couple clips later where as a taller, lankier guy, guys get up underneath him at times and he loses all his power, plays kind of straight-legged. It's hard to tell who's going to be able to fix that and who isn't. The fact that he is able to get low and sink his hips with a flat back in the run game is an indicator that he might really be able to learn how to play lower. A lot of times in pass protection, especially these taller guys in college, they get away with playing high, like with a high pad level, because they don't get tested nearly as much. It's funny because a lot of those guys, some of them figure it out like in the first 2 weeks of camp. And that's when it's really cool to see, is to watch, all right, day one, he's getting kind of rode up out of there. But then all of a sudden they figure it out. Some other guys, it takes a year or 2 or 3. And some of it comes down to physical maturity, getting in the weight room, all of that. Like Charlie Heck was a guy that when he first got to the Texans, I think he was just physically immature. And I don't think that that's an issue with Fisher. So I think it's more of one of technique and competition. Press conference. How would you describe your game?
Yeah, my game just dominant. Always looking to find work. Always looking to find ways to help the boys next to me, the guys next to me, and then on top of that, just finish. I think that's the biggest thing, is just finishing.
And that's something on it. That was in John Harris's comments too, was that he likes to finish. He's got that taste for the more aggressive side. Ultraviolence. I know that one of you guys. Ultraviolence is just a Clockwork Orange reference. So I watched a Clockwork Orange not that long ago. But ultraviolence in general, like football ultraviolence, not violence, but the football ultraviolence. Don't get too finicky about this stuff. Don't be pristine. None of us are virgins here. Next question. Did you know the Texans were interested in you, and how do you feel about playing with Tunsil and Howard? And honestly, some of these guys, when they get drafted, I don't know if he knows what the Texans situation is at offensive tackle. Like he might have zero clue a few minutes after the draft. They've already got 2 really highly paid offensive tackles on the line.
For sure. I would definitely say, I met with them during the combine, had a formal visit with them. And then I would say, I had a couple of Zooms with them. But didn't know the interest was this high. But, love this opportunity, especially being able to be, back with, one of my OGs from, college, Jared Patterson. And, then, young and up growing team, just being able to contribute. Just bring, what I bring to the game, to this program.
Yeah, so sorry I cut you off there, Blake Fisher, a little bit. The other thing I'm getting is like he didn't really realize that the Texans were that high on him. You compare that to to Xavier Leggett, who flat out told the world that the Panthers were probably going to draft him. Honestly, oh, those poor bastards probably heard about that from Dave Tepper. Like Dave Tepper. Like, why are you telling draft picks what your intentions are exactly before the draft? CJ last year didn't have a clue. CJ thought the Texans didn't like him. CJ said CJ didn't know where he was going until the Texans drafted him. He thought he might go anywhere in the top 9. So like CJ thought the Texans didn't like him. I think he probably maybe knew a little bit about the David Mulligetta history and experience with the Texans as well. And maybe they wondered, like I think Mulligetta wondered whether the Texans liked him. I think honestly, we forget that there were valid questions as to whether the Texans would take a Mulligetta client because of the history with Deshaun. Remember, not just the Deshaun allegations, but Deshaun requesting a trade before any of the allegations were even public. So like that part's all water under the bridge, but they do a really good job of keeping it close to the vest. Nick, then he was he was asked, why did you think that the Texans' interest wasn't that high?
They kind of hit it. You know what I mean? Like, like when you can kind of tell, you kind of sense like, okay, like this team could be in the play. But I really didn't get any signs from them. I had a quick Zoom with them, a couple weeks ago, and that was it. And then for about the combine, I haven't heard anything else really. So to kind of know that there was a team, interested, in me, kind of, under the rug, if you will, is a blessing. A blessing for sure. Let me know that somebody believes in me and believes that I can be a big contribution to to the group.
I don't know about under the rug as a phrase. Except, you know what? Will Anderson has done that. Because, like, Will Anderson took a phrase that might be typically a negative one where he said Houston ain't for everybody. Like, usually when you say, he's not for everybody, it's a little bit of a subtle passive-aggressive shade at somebody. Like, Will Anderson has said, like, no, Houston's not for everybody. You got to be wired a certain way to come play here. He just put it out there. He told that to guys at the Pro Bowl. Pro Bowlers were talking to Will about, like, wanting to play for the Texans, and Will's like, I don't know if you're good enough. I don't know if your Texans worthy. So likewise, keeping things under the rug. Yeah, we know what you're saying, Blake Fisher. Blake Fisher, offensive tackle, second rounder for the Texans. This is Caserio in his first opening statement on Blake Fisher.
Good football player. Started his career at left tackle. Moved over there to right tackle when all moved to left tackle. So I think we've always been a big believer you can't have enough tackles on your football teams. You need 3 or 4 tackles that you feel can go out there and play. You all have seen us play. At some point, they're going to have to play. Even going back to 22, we had to play multiple tackles. Once we picked Blake, I don't know how many offensive linemen went after that, but it was close to double digits. I don't have the exact count, but it might have been 6 or 8.
Nick always talks about bands of players and trying to get into a spot where you feel good about where you are. I think with defensive tackles, they missed out on that band of players. 4 defensive tackles went in 5 consecutive picks. There were 4 defensive tackles taken. And then when the Texans took Lassiter, 2 cornerbacks had gone immediately. 2 teams jumped up to get 2 cornerbacks right before Lassiter. Maybe with offensive tackles, compared to like the number of guys that they had available, I think probably by that point, by the time they got to Fisher, they might have been thinking like, all right, well, look, we've got a guy right here. We weren't really planning. Like, I know best player available, et cetera, et cetera. I think that he didn't want to dick around and end up like being stuck way far out of a band or anything. And he just wanted to take the best guy available. Everything he said about needing 3 offensive tackles is true. I do wonder what it means for Charlie Heck, but you saw last year. I mean, George Fant goes off and gets a nice contract here in free agency. It would have been nice to retain George Fant, but it's a hell of a lot cheaper to retain a Blake Fisher on a rookie contract for a few years. This is Blake Fisher on his impression of the Texans initially.
Great coaching staff. They love ball. On top of loving ball, they just really love their players. Players, coaches. Really want their players to be successful and want to find all the ways that they can help their players be successful.
Yeah, I think that part too, just the love ball part. Like the coaches, the Texans coaching staff, it's one that I'm a little bit jealous of the players that get to play for that staff, because I think D'Amico sets a tone for like not just I don't want to say easygoing is not the right word, but they're just not caught up in. They're not all caught up in the BS that sometimes football coaches fall into, where they think they need to be the movie version of Vince Lombardi or the movie version of a Marine drill instructor or something like that. Like, it's in their head that they're supposed to be a D-bag somehow. So D'Amico is decidedly not that. But I do think too, and this is key, like whether you're a hard edge personality or a soft and fuzzy, warm, loving, hugging personality, like as long as you're really good at setting the focus towards a common goal and avoiding the distractions as a coach that can get in your way from that or detract from all that, it makes everything else so much easier to handle, and in a job that's inherently stressful because everybody's getting fired all the time, there's usually not really any reason to add on to that stress. So like D'Amico, I think, is a guy that's very comfortable allowing guys to remember to, like, okay, yeah, let's have fun doing this thing. Let's play our butts off, but let's also have fun and not make it any more miserable than it needs to be. And like that goes a long way, man. It goes a long way because I've seen the opposite side of it. And it's a long season. It's a long season when it doesn't feel that way. Bobby Slowick too. I think when we talk about coaches, like Bobby Slowick in the run game is the big question this year. And I think that I've talked to enough people, both from San Francisco and here in Houston, that I'm confident that the run game is going to look a lot better this year, if only because they know what the challenges are with Dameon Pierce, right? Where last year they were trying to force the issue with Dameon Pierce. And early on I wondered, like, why is Dameon the one getting the lion's share of the carries here? And yeah, you know what? I'll pat myself on the back. I'm going to pat myself on the back for two things here. One was I thought Singletary should have been getting more carries right from the get-go last year. Two, the defensive tackles that went in that band there, I thought they were all relatively interchangeable. So there you go. I win the award. But they wasted a lot of time trying to force the issue with Dameon Pierce. Now you bring in Joe Mixon, who is, as much as I like Devin Singletary for what he is, Joe Mixon is a more of a workhorse back. But then also in getting Chris Strausser, the offensive line, 1 year into the system after he'd never really been in a system like this before, and having the guys, the holdover and now hopefully healthier offensive linemen, it's going to be better. Like, I'm not promising that they're going to be a top 5 rushing team or anything, but I'm going to be really, really surprised if it's not a better rushing attack this year. Like, I'll be incredibly surprised. And that's a hallmark of Shanahan offenses too, is that they get better in the second year just through reps. Gary Kubiak used to, I remember the first time I started talking to Gary about his offense because I was curious. Because as a player, I was just quizzing him about it. And really, he really focused on, it's reps. It's reps. You got to get to where because it's also about deception. So the reps are about making everything look this exact same. And you do that by doing it multiple times. And then you can use that to use zone run to set up the bootleg and all that. This is where it gets interesting. Is he interested? What is it? Is he comfortable playing guard? That was the question. Are you comfortable moving inside and playing guard?
I never play inside, but I'm not opposed to being on the inside. I feel like I'm a versatile player. I feel like there's a lot that I can do in my game, left, right tackle. But really, I just want to come in and contribute, wherever that is, left tackle, right guard, left guard. Never played center before, so, if that's what they want, I got it, but, my dog JP's at center, so I think he can hold it down, in there in the middle. But nah, man, I'm excited.
I hadn't caught that the first time. Yeah. Jarrett Patterson is at center, but Juice Scruggs is ahead of him. So he's gotten this. I don't know if this happens, man. Like Blake Fisher, you're going to hear later how many top 30 visits he took. Like, there's no way guys can know every team in the scenario they're walking into, especially a few minutes after the draft. Like, I don't know if at this point in the call, if he realized that there are already 2 starters penciled in and that he's going to have to compete for that job. Like, Laramie's not losing his job, right? But Titus with a couple years left, and who can play guard, kind of. Like, there might be more of a genuine competition there than people might expect. So, and as Nick alluded to earlier, you need 3 offensive tackles at least. But when Blake Fisher said, well, I gotta he's willing to do it, but he's never done it before, I started to get nervous because we know this team, going back to O'Brien and their love of offensive linemen who can move all around. Nick Caserio was asked pretty much the same question.
Yeah, Blake's really a tackle. So, I mean, we'll look at, you never want to say, well, we're just going to move a guy inside just because. So the player may be able to handle it, may not be able to handle it. I'd say not just Blake, but generally speaking, not all tackles can just move inside. I think sometimes there's this propensity to move certain players inside if they're a certain size or whatever the case may be. I think Titus is definitely unique. I mean, I'd say, Titus is a better tackle than he is an inside player. I mean, Titus is honestly one of the better tackles, in the league. We always say they're a tackle until they're not.
Yeah, they're tackling until they're not. I was glad to hear that, because I just don't I don't want to see that. I don't want to Xavier Suafilo this or Titus Howard this or do anything that keeps a guy from developing at the position that he's best at, because everything's different. The footwork is different. The timing is different. The speed, the power, everything's different inside and outside. And it's not that offensive tackles are generally more athletic and higher paid, but that doesn't mean that because of that, it's simple for them to play guard. They're completely different positions. So I would prefer that not happen. Just to address something that Frank Z said, you said this before Nick had weighed in. I really, just from watching Blake Fisher, from what Nick said and everything else, I'd be very, very surprised if they move him down inside. Where the hell am I?
Yeah, at 12:30.
Oh, that was the question. How many top 30 visits did you have? 12. He went to 12 top 30 visits. So that stresses me out, because, man, that's a 36-hour ordeal every single time you do it. Or he was going from one place to another, to another, to another. Like, it's hard to eat right and exercise and do all these other things, knowing that right after the draft, you're going to have to show up and be out doing OTAs and minicamp in the Houston Heat. So I get stressed on behalf of these guys sometimes. I just don't want, I put myself in that same situation, and it just seems like it would be absolutely miserable. A few of the coaching points for Blake Fisher. And I really like Blake Fisher a lot, but like every single guy drafted, there's things they need to work on, and there's things he needs to improve. And you're going to see right there, like, sometimes these soft sets, oversets, opens up the inside. That shows up at times. It's not like a huge epidemic or anything. Right tackle here, obviously. This was actually, like, he's good getting to the second level. At times, he's not awesome at it. Like, it's an area for improvement, especially when he starts facing NFL caliber talent. But I actually think that his stuff at the second level and as a pulling guard or as a pulling tackle are actually, the stuff out in space is one of the more impressive things that he does as a 6'6" guy. But there's also times where he looks like a 6 foot and a 6.5 guy, where he gets a little gangly and out over his skis. Some of that can come with maturity and just drilling. Tall, lanky guy. Sometimes guys get up underneath his pads. See some evidence of him getting bull rushed at times. Again, that's no big surprise at all for tall, lanky guys. There was that overset again. And then this is John Harris on draft night. Steph Stradley took this. So I stole this off of Steph Stradley, but that's John Harris to the left. That's Seth Payne to his left. That's Robert Hensley to my left. And then that's Mark Vandermeer, who's leaning in for a picture that he doesn't need to lean in for. This is him on Fisher.
Watched them last year. I liked Fisher more than I liked Alt.
Wow, you were mentioning this last night.
I like Fisher more than I liked Alt. I was not a big Alt guy. Now, with Fisher, could he play guard? Is that something you think about? You bring him to camp? Yeah. I like Blake Fisher. He's got finisher tendencies. He wants to put people on the ground. I like that. At Notre Dame, very well coached. I know somewhere Sean Pendergast was dancing at I like Blake Fisher. I was one of the I didn't see his name in his process a lot. So I thought, am I missing something? So I went back in late February and watched him. And I thought, no. This guy is legit. Now, what does he play tackle? Can he play guard? You bump him inside the guard. He's played tackle a lot. I like him out on the edge, but obviously we know what the tackle situation is out there. There's a part of me not really surprised by this pick, because I do think he could go into guard, and now your guard competition gets really, really interesting. I mean, look, last year you drafted Juice, and you thought more than likely he's going to play center. He played center at Penn State. Felt like a good fit. Texans probably needed a center more than anything else at that point. You had Kenyon Green. You traded for Shaq Mason. Where'd you end up? We ended up at guard.
I don't want Fisher at guard. Juice Scruggs is a center. We saw Nick say that a tackle is a tackle until he's not. I feel like Juice Scruggs was a center until he got moved to guard, and then it really looked like he's a center. So I'm cool with Juice Scruggs competing as center. Patterson, I feel good about Patterson doing both. Patterson has kind of the length to be a guard, but also the short area quickness to be a center. So Blake Fisher, though, I'm intrigued by him. I think there's a lot of potential. I think he could end up being really good, but he's also it's not like lack of pressure is a good thing necessarily, but as long as he's motivated enough, he'll probably have some time to get his feet underneath him with, fingers crossed, no injuries to the offensive line, which, by the way, the Texans had the worst total starter games missed to injury in the entire league last year. It's one thing I always have to remind myself when, the Texans started off the season with at various times 3 or 4 backup offensive line playing on the offensive line, that there's a lot of room for improvement just by health. But then the team overall missed so much time with starters due to injury that hopefully that's enough to offset what looks right now like a tougher schedule.